I was a teacher before I was married, and then I was married, and I had 4 children, and I kept on teaching right till the end when I retired. So I would teach for a few years when the kids were young, and then I'd go back to teaching, and I did that my whole life. So if I ever counted the number of years that I taught, it's many years.
I teach grade 6, and it's a special program called Late French Immersion. So they learn the normal BC Canadian curriculum, and they learn it mostly in French. And it is the first year of Late French Immersion, and they continue some form of French immersion right to the end of high school, but they end up being bilingual in English and French.
I am 25. My occupation is an engineer. I grew up in Washington, so I lived here my whole life. And I live specifically in Snohomish, Washington, which is probably all good relative knowledge, I guess. And I live in Seattle now.
Most of it was talking and discussing and bringing in guest speakers. But now, of course, with all the audiovisual, that really expands the way you can present your information on the countries, or whether it's geography or whether it's history, or say our social study book, and it was kind of boring, I would find other material that I could bring in and that was more interesting. Say, I don't know, maybe the Second World War, which you might not find in a book at that time. It wasn't printed yet, because so you would get a soldier come in and talk about his experience overseas during the war. I mean, that was very possible. And so that's called first-hand social studies. When we went to school, there were large classes, 35 and 40, and there was no time for you to ask questions. All you were expected to do was to listen and learn. A little about on Africa, there's no question. Very little on Asia at that time, and South America the same. So unfortunately, a lot of it was European concentrated. Yeah, because I guess a lot of the people in Canada and living where I was living had come from Europe. Understanding people with different languages, understanding people that have different cultural backgrounds, that's very related to social studies. If you don't have the understanding, then your concept of social study would be very minimal. Like you have to you have to think of it in a much broader perspective rather than just.
I do remember I had one high school teacher in grade 10 who really loved war social studies. So we learned about a lot of wars. That is not my favorite thing. In my preparation to become a teacher, there was much more emphasis on inquiry, and students can do projects pursuing their passions. And right now we're in the second spring of the global pandemic. And so it's very sad. All of our field trips are canceled except for virtual ones. And we are engaging in some virtual field trips for the class. But in my area, there's many wonderful historic museums that are outdoors, that are hands-on, where the students can relive history and learn about the background of the European settlers and also the First Nations. In my classroom and in my personal life, I reflect a strong sense of caring for the group, caring for society. And that's important to me in my private life as well. But we often encourage good citizenship and caring about the class, caring about other individuals. And one thing that we engage in as often as we can, we participate in student vote, which parallels the municipal, provincial, and national elections. And it's very pro-democracy, and we consider some of the provincial or federal issues. And it, it's more about citizenship and caring for our province, our city, our country, the collective. When we talk about the First Nations around here, we talk about a lot of local First Nations as well as across Canada. But I also have some uh, activities around Lunar New Year. So that's also Chinese New Year, but we have a huge Asian population here in the Lower Mainland. So I think it's really important for the students to know what Lunar New Year is and what it's all about. And then in Surrey, there's also a very large uh, Southeast Asian community, the Indian community. So when we have Visakhi and Diwali, we do a little bit around that. And I tell the students, uh, well, I'm not Indian, but I should know about that because I work right here in Surrey. And I'm not Chinese, but I should know what Lunar New Year is because I live in the Lower Mainland and that's all around us. So context is pretty important. I just really like focusing on experiences. And I tell the kids it's kind of real. Like when we do student vote, we use the real ballot boxes from Elections BC, and we have the voting screens also from Elections BC. And we vote on the actual candidates, and we have to keep it secret until after the national polling stations are all closed. So I like real and hands-on.
I mean, ultimately, it's about recognizing that you don't understand everyone, and that just because you don't understand someone or how they live doesn't mean that it's bad or it's threatening. Social studies is hard because like it's all about how does it relate to your current life and why does it matter to your current life. So like again, getting into ancestry can kind of be a mixed bag of some people are going to be really into that and some people are going to learn that their families maybe weren't the best people in the whole wide world. I mean, I don't think that we should shy away from or try and sugarcoat the bad things in history. I think that we need to recognize where there was a lack of human dignity being practiced and to, challenge students. Obviously, like you're not going to introduce super complex ideas to first graders, but, as they get older, like finding appropriate ways to integrate the ideas of how are we, or just like introduce the theories or ideas or works of what are we doing to rectify this? How are we correcting the lack of human dignity and putting in place like things that recognize human dignity again. When I say we learned like world history, like we learned about ancient civilizations and like the Roman civilizations and honestly, the only one I really remember is like Greece and Rome, and Mesopotamia. So like way back. And we were talking about like the history of England, and I'm like, it's so sad that I don't know. Like, I know that, there were kings and knights in shining armor, and there were lords who ruled over the different lands, but like, we don't really know anything about some of the most like ancient societies and where they came from.